see me live? Refresh your page. But the other people should see me live. You're not ready for what I'm going to tell you tonight, to be honest. You're going to hear some things that are going to rock your world. I'm going to tell you some in-depth analysis about some people that, well, you're not ready to hear what I'm about to tell you. Some of the darkest history in the United States was in the late 1800s. The late 1800s was one of the most gruesome time periods in U.S. history. This time period is the height of lynchings. And if you take the time to really dig in to the lynching chart, then I tell you what, it's just enough to set your hair on fire if you read it and you understand what was happening and why it was happening, what was going on, why it was going on. Take a look. Now, the dark blue lines are going to be black people lynched in the United States of America. And the white lines are going to be the white people lynched. And in the 1890s was the darkest time period because of how depressed people were from losing the lynching war. Because as you can see in the beginning, it was mostly white people being lynched. Because white people who stood up for black people were lynched. And so then what this actually did was break the resolve of white people to participate anymore. Because if you were white, starting in, let me see how close I can get this for you guys. So I'm sorry, you will not be able to read that on my computer screen, but I know the numbers, so I'll just read them to you. Okay, you're going to have, you see the chart right here? These are the numbers of people lynched. So in 1892, you're talking about 63 white people being lynched and 49 black people being lynched in 1892. In 1893, you're going to have 78 white people lynched, and you're going to have 62 black people lynched. And then in 1884, holy smokes, what's going to happen right here? I'm sorry, you can't see it. It's 1884. That's the year. You can barely see it if you look real tight. 1884. Why in the world was there 160 white people lynched? How come? How come? Why is that? Why is that? Anybody? You know why? It was because of the case right up here. I'm so sorry about that, guys. The 1883 case of Pace versus Alabama. Now, what you have to understand that Pace versus Alabama did is it ran away the white people. Because in 1883, when the Supreme Court said that black people and white, and this is Orlando Pace, who was cohabitating with Mary Cox. They were a couple, a black guy and a white chick. White woman, excuse me, proper nomenclature. And they went to the Supreme Court, and in 1883, if you scan up here on the poster, you're going to see 1883 is going to be the Wake Court. Now, this is, at this time, I believe this is 7 unelected, appointed white men. I'm sorry, but that's the history of our country. That's the way it is. Now, when you examine the Wake Court and you look into it, I dare double dog everybody in the room to put that into your search bar and look up each one of those Supreme Court personnel. I don't call them justices. So then as you scroll down right here, so what does Pace versus Alabama exactly say? I'm sorry about that. Pace versus Alabama says that white people and black people cannot be boyfriend and girlfriend. You cannot have a white girlfriend with a black guy. You cannot have a white guy with a black girl. Specifically, it can't happen. So that in 1983, when this holding comes out by the Wake Court and the people on the Wake Court, then in 1884, of course, right here, you can see it on the lynching graph. In 1884, there's 160 white people in America who are lynched. So what this does, call it the cooling effect. And you notice the white lynchings will start to drop, and the black lynchings will start to increase. Because this little time period in history is going to be the late 1890s. Right here, we're coming in. Boom, right here. Right here. Now, all throughout right here, you see how the white lynchings are going to drop and the black lynchings are going to increase. This is when white America was, frankly, that's what you know how it is. If you're black and you hear about someone getting lynched, you are messed up, right? It hurts. Hearing about someone getting lynched, oh my God. So it creates a cooling effect. And here's the reason why, though. Because now it's the law. The law has been determined. How many people in the room have said, the Supreme Court says? How many people have said that? Type it down in there for me. How many people? Where's everybody from? Where's everybody watching? Where's everybody at? Tell me where you are. Okay. Now, let's go over here. Now, as we go down history here, we know Plessy versus Ferguson is going to create racial segregation, legal racism, where they're going to separate restaurants and bars. Bad Elk versus the United States, 1900, that's going to be your resisting arrest charge. That case is the reason why you can be charged with resisting arrest in America is because the 1900 case of Bad Elk versus the United States. John Bad Elk was a Native American who was going through what's called assimilation. Again, I double dog anybody to put that into your search bar and see what assimilation means for Native American people. And then you'll understand what Bad Elk case does. John Bad Elk is an officer of the law. Another officer goes to arrest him. And John Bad Elk says, I'm not going to jail with you because no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause. That's the Fourth Amendment. You see right there? So John Bad Elk, when they came to arrest him, John Bad Elk said, but yo, no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause. That's what John Bad Elk told. The other guy's name was, I don't want to mess it up because he's a Native American name, so I don't want to mess it up. The other guy's name was John something else too. They both had the first name of John. I just found it ironic that they had to take that surname as being a Native American person. Neither one of them was their name John. So John Bad Elk versus the other John Raven or something like that. Forgive me, I'm not trying to be rude. But John, just make for John Native American was going to arrest the other John Bad Elk, and John Bad Elk said, no warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause, I am not going to jail with you, right? And so, what happens here? I'm so sorry. What happens? So John Bad Elk and John Native American, they shoot each other. Bang, bang. Bang, bang. And then it goes to the Supreme Court. So then if you go up the graph right here and you take a look, and then you just go ahead and take a look at who was on the Supreme Court in 1900. In 1900. Who was on the Melvin P. Fuller Court? Who was it? Do you know who the personnel of that court was? Have you ever researched what they did, the laws that they passed? There's a couple in here, but John Bad Elk. So what does Rufus Peckham say? Is Rufus on here? Is Rufus on here? Did I put Rufus on this one? Rufus Peckham's not on here, but he kind of looks like this guy. Anyway, Rufus Peckham from the 1900 case of John Bad Elk, he says, you are not allowed to resist the police. But even though there was, and John Bad Elk, the guy who shot the other guy, he wasn't guilty. He didn't have a warrant for his arrest. There was no warrant. There was no warrant that shall issue. And so the Supreme Court justices, what they did is instead they convict him of a manslaughter charge, and then he died in jail. That's just dark. And as dark as that story is about how they put two Native Americans through trying to be an American police officer, called them first both named John, right? Bad as that is, this case haunts us today. This is the reason why you can be arrested for resisting arrest. I'll bet you didn't know that. From 1900, Rufus Peckham, that's the guy who said, you cannot resist the police. Now, why is it so important what Rufus Peckham wrote? Why does it matter so much? Well, because whatever the Supreme Court says is the supremacy clause. So if you've ever said the Supreme Court says, the Supreme Court says, the Supreme Court says, you're right. Whatever the Supreme Court says is the law. But is it a just law? Is the law just? Did you vote for the Rutledge Court? But let's make it more current. Did you vote in any of the Roberts Court Did you vote for any of those people? Did you take a vote and said, you know what? Well, let me ask you guys a question. Let me drink some water real quick. Let me ask you guys a question. What is the functionality of the Supreme Court? I need to know if you guys can answer that. What is this functionality of the Supreme Court? What is the actual functionality? The functionality is they're going to determine if any of the laws that are created, these are laws that are created that go to the Supreme Court. All of these are laws. Olmsted versus United States, this is a law that goes to the Supreme Court. And what they do is in Chille versus Kramer, they come back here and they go, okay, does Chille versus Kramer violate any of these people's civil rights? Does Chille versus Kramer violate any of these people's rights right here? Does it take away your liberty? Do you have to quarter some troops? Was your right to remain silent taken away in any of these laws? But typically, what most of the laws that go up to the Supreme Court, if they're not a civil rights violation, then it's the question of the 10th Amendment is the law listed in the first 10 amendments, in the 10th Amendment? Okay? So now, you know how America's imperialistic, right? So the Louisiana Purchase is 1803, right? So Louisiana Purchase is 1803. And then right over here, we take Texas right after that, 18. Oh shit, I'm definitely enjoying my night, and so I'm just gonna say that. So anyway, we took this a little bit after that, and the way we took this, the way America took Texas, the way we took Texas, the way we just took Texas from the Mexican people, and then we would later slaughter them. But the way we took it initially was we said that we were going to mortgage some property, we were going to pay you guys some property, and then we moved all into Texas. A bunch of settlers did. And then what they did is when the Mexicans came there to collect the rent, the Americans said, no, this is our property. This is our property. We're not moving. And then the Americans killed the Mexicans, and that's just what happened. This is just history. This is dark history, but this is the truth. Okay. And then we just took the rest of the West Coast as well. We just took all of this land. We just took the Southwest and killed so many Mexicans to do it. Someone talked to me earlier and they said, I'm sorry, on the map of the globe on here. And then, so now, as we continue down the darkest history that you could really know of, that probably no one ever told you about before, this is some of the darkest, nastiest stuff you're ever going to hear. Okay. So William Howard Taft, this guy, does anybody know anything about William Howard Taft? Let me just tell you about William Howard Taft. If you take a look up here, you're going to see right... Sorry about that. We're going too far south. The Taft Court from 1921 to 1930. So when you see the name up here, that's the name of the Supreme Court Justice, the Grand Poobah, the guy that really sets the court everything. He's the whole almighty of the court. That's the way it is. Currently, John Roberts of our Supreme Court is the holy almighty for that court, just like William Howard Taft. And William Howard Taft was not only that, he was also governor of the Philippines in the early 19th century, 1800 to 1802, 1803. He was the governor of the Philippines. And you know what? Then he came back to America, and then he was president, 1809, from 1809 to... Am I going to be able to see that? Oh, I'm not going to see it. And I'm stoned, so I don't want dyslexia in my ears because I always mess it up. I'm not that smart. I just know history. So then he comes back and he's president from 1909 to 1913. No, I'm wrong because he's on the court from 1910. So he was president from 1905 1909. Again, I think that's what it is. I think 1905 to 1909. Anyway, but what I just said a second ago, he was governor of the Philippines. Anybody ever talk about that before with you? Have you ever heard of what he did in the Philippines? So I'm going to have to spell some things because I don't want to get kicked off of TikTok. Well, we're an imperialistic country. The reason why I showed you that we went in and we just took Texas and then we killed all these people, all these Mexican people, and we took the rest of the Southwest after that, and that's just how that went. And so then over here, we went to the Philippines, and we got the Philippines from the Spanish after the Spanish War. the 7-Day War. We took the Philippines from them. They gave it to us and said, hey, you colonize it. That's what they said to us. So William Howard Taft went over there to colonize the Philippines, and he set up RAPE camps. He set up concentration camps. Think about Nazi Germany without so much of the killing, but lots of the RAPING and pillaging. The Native American Filipinos were very savvy, and they ran and did not fight with the troops, and they lived and survived, but they were put in concentration camps by him. And they did so much RAPING of Filipino women that in 1963, 63 or 67, God bless America. Anyway, it was either him or him, Lyndon Johnson, who signed the 1967 Immigration Act. Someone can fact check me on that, 63 Immigration Act. And and then if you had DNA in you from an American, you could move to the United States. And guess what? All the men who had had sex with Filipino women, their offspring applied for visas and came to the United States of America. At that time, just so you know, in the true fact history, John F. Kennedy and Johnson, remember, he was very powerful. And in 1961, 62, when he became president, he wanted to bring over more Irish and more Europeans. Because remember, it's the beginning of the civil rights kind of beginning of it, and he's going to be the forefront of it. But he literally wants the agenda between Lyndon Johnson and John F. Kennedy is to import more white Irish Europeans, right? That's what they wanted to do. And you know what happened? A bunch of Filipinos came over, and Koreans from the Korean War, and the Filipinos and the Koreans who came over, right? The reason why downtown LA, let's go down here. The reason why downtown LA was bought up, all the liquor stores were bought up by the South Koreans in the late 1860s and mid 1970s, and that's the spark of the Rodney King riots. The Koreans who came over from the Korean War, they had American DNA, the same situation, but not nearly as disgusting as Taft, obviously. They just had relationships, hopefully. God, I don't want to think about it. Anyway, the point is then when they came here right after the 60s, it was 67, because when the Koreans got here, they weren't a part of any of that civil rights stuff. They hadn't seen it. They weren't a part of it. So when they made friends with other white Californians, they got subsidized loans, and they bought up all those liquor stores in South Central. And that made the black community resent them. And they had a real problem with the black community, and they resented the same community that they worked for. It was a total melting pot created for disaster. And then people don't know, but I'm sorry, let me drink some water. People don't know it, but the real travesty of the Rodney King riots and the subsequent slaughter of so many good people, what happened was the Korean and the black population had reached a boiling point. And when a black woman did a mere assault at best to a Korean woman, she shot her in the back of the head as she walked away, and then a judge pardoned the Korean owner of the lot. And that was the real spark for the Rodney King riots. That's why if you go back and you look at video, you'll see a lot of Koreans armed fighting against the black community. This is just a simple fact. This is just a simple fact. Okay? And you know that because the 67 Immigration Act brought over how many Filipinos? I happen to love Filipino women. Any single Filipino women, hit me in the DMs, baby. So let's go back to dark history. Forgive me. Okay, we would be remiss if we didn't mention blackface. Blackface. Ooh, let's put a little spooky music on for blackface. Are you ready? Let's put a little spooky music on. Boop 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 boop. Okay. Okay. Are you ready? All right, you guys are hitting that like button, so here we go. You ready? Okay. The way we get the term dark face, black face, the reason why people are so offended by blackface in particular. And this is the catalyst for Jim Crow laws. Have you ever heard of Jim Crow laws? Jim Crow was not a mean plantation owner. Jim Crow was a minstrel act done when white actors put on blackface and pretended as though they were a black person. The dialect, the swagger, the moxie, every single thing that was completely and utterly stolen from black people. You can go online and watch a minstrel show. I showed it one time. People called me racist. It's history. You should take a look at what a minstrel show is and was. And so when you get the term blackface, the name of the actor who created it was named Dartmouth Rice. Dartmouth Rice lived his act started in 1830, and then he retired in 1860, right before the Civil War. What his act was about was him acting like a feeble-minded clown. He couldn't drink, he couldn't walk, he couldn't talk, he was bumbling and foolish, and his name was Jim Crow, the slave. And so his act became so popular from 1830 to 1860. He was the most famous and known actor. He liked to be called Big Daddy. In case you didn't know, I'm not joking. You can look it up. And what he did was he portrayed black people in every way he possibly could by painting his face black, and called himself Jim Crow. And that was the picture that anybody who watched entertainment learned in the 1830s, that Jim Crow was a feeble-minded black fool who couldn't walk, couldn't talk, couldn't drink, couldn't think. His brain wasn't all the way developed. And so when you think about Jim Crow, and then what happens, he retires act in 1861, and then when he retires his act, what happens right there? There's the Civil War right there. 1861 to 1865, the Civil War. And so then the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment come out, and what do they say? In the 15th Amendment in 1870, black men over the age of 21 are going to get the right to vote because Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony gathered thousands of signatures for black men to be able to vote in this country. These two white women gave up the movement to get women's right to vote, and they gave it to the black man. You can't collect 10,000 signatures right now. If your baby gets killed, it's impossible to collect the amount of signatures they did by sending out a piece of paper and a stamp. Imagine it. And so what happens is the white Southerners, who certainly don't want Jim Crow, the bumbling, foolish clown, to be able to vote in their elections, can't walk, can't talk, can't drink, can't think, he's Jim Crow. And so in the 1870 amendment, in the 15th Amendment in 1870, they say you can't let Jim Crow vote in our elections. What happens next? Plessy versus Ferguson happens in 1896. This is where the Supreme Court rules that black and white people will be segregated, but let's put it into context. You can't have Jim Crow in the same restaurant as my children. You can't have Jim Crow swimming in the same swimming pool as my daughter. That is the true way you get what's called Jim Crow laws. You're separate, but you're equal, right? Not true. Not true. So now what blackface in America represents, in America, remember, there's other cultures around the world who paint their faces black who are not racist. In the Dutch. We'll go into that another time. This is dark history. And what Jim Crow represents when you say separate but it's equal is 30 black babies dying in a hospital to every one white baby. Like it or not, those are facts. Because the separate but equal slogan never ever came to be truth. And so what happened next? Right here, let's talk about the most disgusting law to me. But my study of history, of everything I went through, besides Pace versus Alabama, which truly disgusts me, just disgusts me, the 1908 case of Barrera, it's actually Barrera College versus Kentucky. And it should actually be, one second, let me fix that. It's actually supposed to be called, let's do it again. Okay. So this is, sorry about that. Barrera College versus Kentucky is something that you're just not going to believe. So Plessy versus Ferguson, this creates a separate but equal doctrine where the things will be separate, the hospitals, the bars, the restaurants, the schools, everything will be separate, but it's going to be totally equal, okay? And in Plessy versus Ferguson, when it creates legal segregation, what happens is the 1908 case of Barrera College versus Kentucky. And in this case right here, they rule that little black kids and little Asian, specifically there was Asian kids going to this Kentucky school and black kids, of course, in Kentucky. And they ruled that Barrera College couldn't allow schools to have little black kids and little white kids go to the same school at the same, even at different times. And this is what created that black people had cooties. Now, it was taught for years, but remember what you've always said that you thought was really, this just thing, that it was so American. The Supreme Court said, and so in Barrera versus Kentucky, now little kids who had said for years that black kids had cooties or Asian kids had cooties, and they could not go to the same school at the same time because the cooties from their skin would get on the desk and they would have to touch where a black person touched, or they would have to sit where an Asian sat. They would have to eventually get an Asian teacher or even a black teacher, God forbid. If we allow that, we can't, what else are we going to allow? Everything, right? And so you think to yourself, this would never hold up. Yeah, they rule against Barrera College and they say, you can't have little black kids and little white kids, little Asian kids learning the same four walls. You can't do that. Who says it? The Supreme Court. Oh, sorry about that. The Supreme Court says, what year was this? I'm so sorry, 1908? So you're going to be right there in the Melvin P. Fuller Court. That court right there said that you cannot let little black kids and white kids and Asian kids and Mexican kids, you can't let them sit at the same desk. Or what's going to happen, I don't know. But the Supreme Court says, we've all said it, the Supreme Court says, like there's some good and just institution that cares about justice and truth and honor and respects this Bill of Rights and respects your right to be free. Not even close, my friends. How many white supremacists were on the Fuller Court? I double dog dare you to look it up. Now, Hugo Black, you guys may not know much about him, but this man, the reason why he's behind this right here is because this is right at the tip, at the very end of corporate America. West Coast Hotels versus Partheth, and that's going to make a minimum wage. But in 1937, this man, Hugo Black, was appointed to the Supreme Court. He was the first Supreme Court justice appointed in 1937 by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the greatest president in U.S. history and the only one to have concentration camps in Central Park. We don't talk about that, though. We don't talk about him being sued by Korematsu in 1944 and then him losing because FDR had appointed 7 of the Supreme Court justices over his tenure. 1937 to 1946. So he would have been here. Franklin Delano Roosevelt would have appointed Hugo Black to the Hughes Court, and then he would appoint 7 more Supreme Court justices. I believe the last one was in 1946. I don't want to be incorrect, so make sure I'm not going to say which one. Anyway, we continue. The first person he appointed to the Supreme Court in 1937 was a member of the KKK, Hugo Black. Put Hugo Black plus KKK. Look it up. He's a lifetime member of the KKK from Alabama. Yes, he was, indeedy. Now, it's so funny because, of course, I built this poster, so I've researched these people to the very tip. I've read his Supreme Court holdings, They say he became a good man and a civil rights icon and fought for liberty and freedom. I wish I knew how to change Wikipedia, because he was the lead inquisitor, the member of the KKK. Hugo Black, the lead questioner. Terry versus Ohio is right here. Whammo. And then, oh no, the prison industry. What happened? Could it have been Terry versus Ohio? It might have been. That's it. We'll talk about Terry in a minute. This is dark history. So Hugo Black is appointed to the Supreme Court by FDR in 1937, and then in a very landmarking case called Terry versus Ohio that puts officer safety over our rights, Hugo Black, who was governor of Alabama from 1927 to 1937, and then appointed to the Supreme Court, grew up in Clay County, Alabama, born in 1892. By 17, he was born, Jiminy Crickets, 1892, I believe. 1896. No, I'm so sorry. He was born in 1886. Hugo Black was born in 1886. Because by 1896, born in Clay County, Alabama, he had seen 10 people lynched in Clay County, Alabama. I know quite a bit about the lynching chart. We already talked about it earlier. I'm not going to get into it again. But I know quite about it. And he was in Alabama before he was 10. There were 16 lynchings in Alabama. He then joined the party of the Ku Klux Klan, And I believe that was 1923, 1924. He was elected senator of Alabama in 1927. And then appointed to the Supreme Court. The very first Supreme Court justice that FDR appointed to the Supreme Court. And then after that, when John Terry went to trial in 1967, the base of the Terry versus Ohio trial, his representative was a gentleman named Louis Stokes. It was his first time he was argued in front of the Supreme Court. Wouldn't you know that they give John Terry a first-time lawyer in front of the Supreme Court justices? On the other side was Louis Stokes. I don't have his picture on here. Forgive me. I don't have either of their pictures. I'm talking about the lawyers. And in the whole case, let me just tell you what the whole case is about. This man right here. Do you see who I'm looking at? John Terry. He's grabbed by this police officer. The cop runs up and grabs him. And he says, "I was afraid for my life." So he was walking around the street. This cop ran up and grabbed him. And then the argument in Terry versus Ohio, Martin McFadden ran up and grabbed him. And then the argument in the Supreme Court is that it was for officer safety. What? I swear to God. Watch the Overturn Terry on my YouTube channel, Delete Laws. Watch Overturn Terry on my YouTube channel on Delete Laws. Watch that. Watch Overturn Terry on Delete Laws right there on that YouTube channel. That's my website. If you guys want a poster, get it on my website. I'm not selling posters tonight. If you guys want to buy one, get it off the site. If you want one for free, hit me, deletelaws@gmail.com. I'll send you a free poster if you want one for free. All right. So now we were here. And so why do I say that he's someone who's, remember, I don't curse and I don't say anything too harsh. I keep it very rated G. And so the best term I could use for him is that he was a fraud and he was a member of the KKK until he died. And here's the reason why. Because when Martin McFadden grabbed John Terry and then Earl Warren tried to make the argument that the cop had a right because he was afraid for his life maybe, but it was at 2:30 in the afternoon on Euclid Avenue in downtown Cleveland, busy as New York City today. And so now what happens here is the two lawyers argue, and they say that cops can run up and grab John Terry because the officer was in fear for his life. And so then what the Supreme Court did, this branch of government, they created a policy called Terry policies that now, just like Martin McFadden grabbed John Terry, the police can run up and grab you under 3 specific circumstances. Number 1, if you have just committed a crime. Number two, if you are in the act of committing a crime. Or number three, if the cop believes that maybe you're about to commit a crime. I ain't kidding you. Because John Terry wasn't breaking the law. John Terry didn't do anything wrong. He wasn't breaking the law. He was just walking around downtown. And so what happens is, I'm sorry, let me get this all set up for you guys nicely. Sorry about that, fellas. And so what happens here is, because the Supreme Court said, like I've been talking about the whole time, the Supreme Court said, when Martin McFadden grabbed John Terry, now the exact same rules that happened to him can happen to us. That's what Terry laws are. That's what they are. Is that police can run up and grab you in the name of officer safety. And it used to mean, in the Terry laws that are the Terry policy created by the Supreme Court that said, led by Earl Warren, who was a total fraudster. I'll go into his dark history next. So now why do I say specifically, though, now that you know what Terry does? What Terry does is it makes it so that cops, just like McFadden, can run up and grab you if they say that they're in fear for their life or they think that you're about to commit a crime. And so then what happened, Hugo Black, the way they created the little detainment area where you can be detained, the reason how you can be detained is because of this guy right here. And what he does with the lawyer for the government right here in front of John Terry at the Terry trial in the Supreme Court in 1967, they say that, well, if the cop stops you and asks you questions, well, then you're not being arrested. You're just being detained. Because they just grabbed him to put him in handcuffs to talk to him. Right? They grabbed him and put him in handcuffs just to talk to him. And now that can happen to you. But Hugo Black is going to go back and forth, member of the KKK, and he's going to go with Louis Stokes. I don't have his picture here. And they're going to go back and forth, and they're going to be like, well, if you're not going to take him to jail, then he's not really arrested, right? He's like, yeah, that's what it is. And that's what the conversation's like. It's disgusting to listen to. It's available on my YouTube channel. And so now that's what can happen to you. But what he asks during the oral arguments, and I've just listened, I broke it down frame by frame on my YouTube channel. So what he asked during the oral arguments is he goes, well, what if the cop wants to do something to Terry besides arrest him? Maybe something a little bit less than arrest him. And the lawyer says, well, what do you mean? He goes, he wants to ask him some questions and do something a little bit less. No, Hugo. You're going to have to be a little bit more clean. What do you want the cop to be able to do besides ask him questions? What do you want him to be able to do? A little bit less than arrest him. A little bit less, huh, Hugo? I have no idea what you mean by that. And the lawyer says to him, what do you mean by that? And he goes, you mean he can arrest him, right? And he goes, what if he wants to do something a little bit less than arrest him? Well, considering that what had happened, what was a little bit less than arrested? What year was that? That was 1967. So, you have all of these people who have died and been assassinated all through the 1960s. They all died. And that's what was going on. Woodrow Wilson gets a lot of bad press. You look up Woodrow Wilson, history doesn't look back on him kindly. But he did, he won I want to say the Nobel Peace Prize. We could check on that. But when Prohibition came in 1919, the Volstead Act, and they wanted to create the 18th Amendment that would ban alcohol, Woodrow Wilson vetoed that. He vetoed that. He said, no, I'm not going to prohibit alcohol, because what you guys are going to do is you're going to create a police state, prison state, because people want to drink alcohol. That's what he said. And so there's the prison population in 1920. I'm so sorry, I'm skipping a little fun fact here. Then after it went through Congress, the 18th Amendment, and the Congress signed off on it when it went to his desk. So Congress writes laws, and then the executive signs laws. If you live in Alaska, then your Congress write laws, and then your governor, the executive, signs laws. That's how that works. And so when Prohibition went to Congress, Congress said, yay, and they all rubber stamped it. Let's do a mandate. And then the executive branch, Woodrow Wilson at the time, said, no, I'm going to veto that. Nope. Zip, zip, zip. Well, what is the redress? What's the redress? The redress is that Congress can override his veto with 2/3 of a vote from Congress. And so what did Congress do? They overrode his veto because Article 1 of the Constitution, Article 2 of the Constitution, Article 3 of the Constitution. So when you hear Article 1, Section 3, that's the congressional branch of government, the third paragraph. Very simple. Okay. So now when Woodrow Wilson, when he vetoed it, they overrode it. And then what happened? Woodrow Wilson said, you're going to create the industrial prison complex in America. And then, yeah, we quadrupled our prison industry in just 13 years. He was exactly correct. Has anybody ever heard of the Wickersham Commission? Anybody ever heard of that? Has anybody ever heard of the Wickersham? You ever heard of this right here? You ever heard of the Wickersham Commission? Has anybody ever heard of this before? The Wickersham Commission. This right here. Anybody? I always talk about the Mullen because it's the most recent. But what about the Wickersham? Anybody heard of that? Is there anybody in the room? Is anybody here? I forget it's late. People just zone out into watching the phone. I fall asleep sometimes watching it when I'm just not talking. Okay. The Wickersham Commission right here. The Wickersham Commission. I'm so sorry. I was wrong on my year. It was the 1965 Immigration Act. Immigration and Nationality Act. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's the Immigration Nationality Act. That's what it was. That brought all the Korean and Filipino with American DNA in them, so they had a right to be here. And it was the 1965 Immigration Act. And it was signed by Lyndon Johnson because, unfortunately, John F. Kennedy would be assassinated before he would have a chance to sign the inauguration nationality bill that he wrote. So, yeah. So, the Wickersham Commission, just so you guys know, I forget how much data I put on this dang count. I mean, I put so much data on this. It's just incredible. There is so much data on here. And on the next version, I'm actually going to put a key code on all their faces. I don't care if people like it or not. But I want people to look up the names of the faces because, thousands and thousands of people have this poster now. And so I want people to be able to look up who these faces are. I know who they are. That's Andrew Mellon. That's Harry Anslinger. That's Lamont DuPont II. That's William Randolph Hearst. That's J.D. Rockefeller. And that's Andrew Carnegie. Now, you may have heard of a documentary called The Men Who Built America. But the truth is, these men right here are the men who controlled America through marijuana and criminalization of marijuana. I've given long lectures on this group several times. Oh, the poster. You can get the poster on my website, brother. Delete Laws. Go to deletelaws.com. Take a screenshot. Yeah, you guys, this is what I do for a living. I just don't get on very much because my account gets banned so much. If you want to buy me a cup of coffee, that's my cup of coffee fund. I appreciate that. Take a screenshot if you would, please. That'd be great. Thanks. And then take a screenshot because I don't like to stay promoting shit for too long. There it is. But there's a ton of information on this. And if you just get the digital one and you print it out at home, oh my God. If you print this out at home and take a picture, right, I'd love to see it. And also, the kids, and by the way, if you don't have any money, I'll give it to you for free. So if you can afford one, great, buy one. But if you don't have any money, I'll give you the digital version for free. It's 27 by 40 inches. I'm looking at the one from my store right here. So this is exactly like the one that I'll send to you. Yeah, on the next version, my brother, I'm going to put all kinds of people that aren't on here. But I'm also going to put a key on these people because, I know this is Elizabeth Cady Stanton. But people don't, and that... Here's the thing. So here's how polarized our world has gotten. You want to hear this? I mean, this is current history, but this is also dark history. So Susan B. Anthony right here, she was fortunate. She was born in America, and her father, remember, she's going to die in 1904, 1906, and she's going to live 86 years. So you just go back from there. It's 26, 27, or 36, whatever. I'm not smart right now. So now listen, what she does, she grows up poor, but her parents believe that she should be able to read and write. So she learns to read and write, and she quickly starts to understand that her presence in this world isn't merely for to be window dressing. She has an opinion and a brain, and she wants to be successful too. And she actually, at one point, she goes to her father and says, hey, look, the woman in the factory is far more competent than that loser you have running it. Have that woman run the factory, Dad. And her dad says, no, I'm not going to do it. And so she eventually gets up and gets strong enough where she starts to get paid for speaking, and she's working to try to get women the right to vote. Along the route, her best friend that she meets on a corner street in New York City is Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Kady, Cady Stanton. And what's going to happen is she's going to, yo, hit me, dude, hit me. Go on there. Yeah, grab the machine.
It's dead.
Well, could you charge it?
I'm charging.
Okay. So sorry, Matt. So now, right here, I'm so sorry. So, I mean, what these women did was just incredible. You know, they gave up what they were trying to do, and they got the signatures to get black people free, or the idea of freedom, or, you know, what's supposed to be freedom. You know, with the police state, prison state that we live in today, it's just a farce. I definitely can't wait. So now as we move forward into dark history, you guys really want to know about Abraham Lincoln? Do you really want to know about him? I mean, do you really want to know about Abraham Lincoln? I mean, he's known as the great emancipator, right? But the truth is that he was anything but a great emancipator. You know, he had a wild streak in him. He was not going to back down from a fight. He was tough as nails, okay? Physically tough as nails. He was a boxer. He was super tough. This guy was a full-on fighter. I mean, that's just who he was. You know, I mean, now that MMA is so popular, I can admit I love getting in the ring and fighting people in the cage, and people, if they can kick my butt or I can kick their butt, it's so much fun for me. But until MMA got popular, you really couldn't say that. So Lincoln, what he does, though, is, I'm not going to remember those people's names, God bless it. Sorry. What he does is he tries to make a deal with the black people. I'm not going to point at Jim Crow. We'll point at Frederick Douglass. And he tries to make a deal to send black people back to Africa. He tries to make a deal. I swear to God. And he goes to the black leadership and goes, listen, what if we give you guys some money and you guys just get on a boat and you go back to Africa? I swear to God, I'm not kidding. And so then when that's not going to work out, I mean, and so just so you know, where is he? Is he on here? Oh yeah, there he is. Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington is one of the leaders that I can't remember if he was involved with Lincoln. He certainly was, because he's the one that funds Giles versus Teasley for voting. But what he does right here is he makes a speech called the Atlantic Compromise, where when Lincoln is just after Lincoln gets a deal done, you know, he then says that, look, black people won't vote. You know, we're not going to try to do any skilled labor jobs. You know, we're just going to do the labor. And, you know, we're just going to, you know, I mean, you got to read the Atlantic speech. Just read it. Go on there and read the Atlantic speech. Just read it. It's called the Atlantic Compromise by Booker T. Washington. Write it down, put it in your thing, and read it. It's disgusting. It's a short read. It's like a page, 2 pages. It's a short read. I think maybe someone can read it to you. So now, here's the weird part, right? So when you talk about, you go back to civil rights, when you're free, when you have these freedoms that are inalienable rights upon birth, where you are, you get the 5 liberties, you get self-protection, you don't have to quarter people in your house, you know, you are free, you have so sorry, I got distracted there for a minute. You know, the Fourth Amendment is the right of the people. Do you see what that says? Dude, grab it. Grab that machine.
Still charging.
It's good enough. Get it.
You can't use it until it's charged all the way.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me put this music on. Let me just put this music on real quick. This is some royalty-free music that I got one time when I was doing a film. Really great stuff. Listen to this, man. This guy's got a crazy song. So a lot of people don't know this, but it was the model penal code. The model penal code. It's going to be on this poster, I guarantee it. The model penal code is going to be written from 1952 to 1962. I'm just remembering because I can't find it on the map and I'm tired, I guess you would call it. But it's called the Model Penal Code. And what the Model Penal Code is going to do from 1952, in 1954, when Harry Blackman, the judge over here, and Herbert Wechsler are the authors of the Model Penal Code. And what does the Model Penal Code do? What does it do? Why am I telling you about the Model Penal Code? How come? Well, because what happens to the Model Penal Code, and they start writing it in 1952. In 1954, my God, there it is. I put it up here because I already know it. I know it inside and out. Because this is what creates mens rea. So these judges, these federal judges, who eventually Harry Blackman becomes on the Supreme Court, they sit around and they write up this set of English penal codes for every possible crime. And more than anything else, the mens rea statute, where it's purposely, knowingly, negligent, willingly, and those are not in that proper order because I'm tired. I swear I'm not that smart, but I just know a lot of shit. So what that does is creates the idea that the courts will determine that if what you've done, what kind of criminal intent you had. That's what the Model Penal Code actually does. It says that it'll determine water. So dying. God dang. Grab me one of those waters over there, will you? Gotcha, thanks. Okay. So, thanks. So what does mens rea exactly do? What does the Model Penal Code do? And what does mens rea do? You ever gone to court before and you said that you hear the district attorney will go, Michael John Miller is accused of knowingly, willingly, recklessly, and purposely assaulting, Tina Johnson Miller, a domestic dispute. And so the mens rea is that the husband intentionally struck his wife, if you're talking about domestic abuse. And so what does that mean exactly? That means that, for example, if the husband is drunk and he's blacked out, then the mens rea would be that he didn't recklessly do that. He may have recklessly done it, but he didn't willingly do it. He wasn't a willing mind. He hadn't decided that he would abuse his wife. He blacked out on alcohol. This isn't a criminal act in the sense that it's criminal because he's a bad guy and wants to beat his wife. This is an act that he did negligently, not willingly, purposely, or recklessly. If I'm not a district attorney. Remember, I'm just a guy who reads a lot of stuff, okay? So, but this is the fact. I know this for a fact. I'm not in any way at all confused. I'm not a prosecutor. I don't know which way they would use those properly, of course. I haven't been a federal district prosecutor. So what this does is makes it so that the courts can just decide if what you did was criminal. Let's give it another example. Let's say that you walk home and you walk into the wrong house. The neighbor doesn't like you. And so the neighbor tells the DA, you know what, I think this guy walked into my house and he was trying to maybe rape me. Whatever you want to say, right? And so the DA can then decide by looking at you and go, yeah, you know what? It wasn't the dental surgery. It was that you walked into the wrong apartment. And so the DA can say that the mens rea is that you willingly did this, that you did this on purpose, that you went there to the neighbor's house. I'm giving the same blacked out drunk story that I gave for the guy who beat his wife. The model penal code, how do you think district attorneys use the model penal code? How could that be in any way considered racist? I'm just being honest. Right? And how come it is when Herbert Waxman is going to write the model penal code 1952, 1954, it's going to be published in 59, peer-reviewed, and then become the standard for all states in 1962. So how come it is 1952, 1954, they made some major alterations? What happened in 1954? What was going on in 1954? Anything important? Brown versus Board of Education. And so you go, well, why did people get desegregated? Because Earl Warren was the great freedom-loving man. He wanted to make everybody be free. Not at all. Earl Warren was a Freemason. He never lost any election he ever went out for. And so then Earl Warren in 1961, Earl Warren is going to Mapp versus Ohio. Mapp versus Ohio. And what this is going to say is that Dolores Mapp is in her house, and she's a babe, and she's maybe a prostitute, and they want to break into her house, and the cops just go running in, and it goes to the Supreme Court, and Dolores Mapp, she wins her Supreme Court because Earl Warren makes the holding with the rest of the Supreme Court that police cannot enter your house without a warrant because that's a violation of your Fourth Amendment right. And that's what Mapp versus Ohio does. Mapp versus Ohio upholds the Fourth Amendment that no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause. That's what Mapp versus Ohio is supposed to do. There's the facts. There it is. And so what happens, just so you know, the police. Now, you may not know this, but back in 1961, right back here, okay, we still got some lynchings going on in America. There's still people being lynched. That's a lynching graph. People are still being lynched. In 1961, when Mapp versus Ohio was passed. So now you can imagine how unified the police force was, because the people who did the lynchings was the police. The guy who did the actual noose around the neck, that was most of the time a cop. When they drug you out of the jail, led by the lynch mob, and then they took you out and strung you up in front of everybody. That's what that was. I'm just keeping it real. These were police. I'm not joking. So when Earl Warren passes Mapp versus Ohio in 1961 that says cops got to have a warrant or you're violating the Fourth Amendment, cops pick it up and down the streets, impeach Earl Warren. Get rid of Earl Warren. He just said we can't raid houses anymore. We just can't go running in your house if we think maybe you might be doing something bad in there. He says we need a warrant now. That's why you got to get a warrant to go in someone's house, because that holding right there, Mapp versus Ohio, says you can't just go running in someone's house without a warrant. That's what that comes from. So if the cops come to your house, you say, no, Mapp versus Ohio 1961, show me the warrant or get away from my door. That's from Mapp versus Ohio is still in effect today. Oh, but there's a caveat. There's a little caveat, okay? In the 1963 case of Kerr versus California right here, right after the World Health Organization in 1961 at the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs said that marijuana was the devil drug, it would turn your wife into a whore, and it would turn your son into an axe murderer. They gave a speech to that regard. Who did it? The World Health Organization at the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs in 1961. Look it up. And so then after that, police were empowered to stop marijuana. The World Health Organization recommended that every marijuana plant within 25 years of 1961 should be eradicated from Earth. And that was at the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs that was led by Harry Anslinger. That was led by Harry Anslinger to criminalize marijuana to protect his investment in the fossil fuels, pharmaceutical industry, wood and energy industry. That's what that happened. That's what that's from. All right, guys. I'm starting to get a headache from talking so much. Hey, man, if you guys want to get one of my posters, that would be awesome. Thanks. If you can't afford one, just send me an email to deletelaws@gmail.com, and I'll give you one for free. It's just a digital poster. So I just got to click some buttons. I totally don't mind sending you digital posters, but you got to save up some money and get it printed out. It'll cost like $30. If I send you the digital poster for free, I'll send it to you for free. I love sending them out. I sat here tonight for an hour and just sent out free posters. So I would love to give you a free one if you don't have the money, dude. No problem. No problem. You just send me an email to deletelaws@gmail.com, and I'll send you a free poster. It's digital. And I'll send you everything. I'll send you all kinds of stuff. I'll send you Racist Origins of Gun Control, the Mullen Commission, which is the best read ever. You know. If you guys learn anything from me, you want to buy me a cup of coffee, there it is. There's my cup of coffee fund right there. Take a screenshot. It's pretty easy. Once you go to Delete Laws, you can find me. I'm pretty easy to find, Chille decastro. Take a screenshot. I got to get out of here. I got to go to bed. I'm totally beat. I love you guys, man. I had a great time. Remember, listen, we only have one America, guys. We're going to have to come together at some level pretty soon. We're going to have to come together. All right? I got nothing but love for you guys, man. Thanks for watching my live. I had a great time with you, and we'll talk again real soon. All right, guys. God bless you. God bless the United States. I hope that we don't go to a civil war. Listen, when the fighting starts, the talking stops. Don't go for a revolution. Go for freedom and the Bill of Rights. All right. Love you guys. Later.